This is an ABC News Yahoo News live stream. The Democratic National Convention. Live from Charlotte, North Carolina. Here are Amy Walter and Rick Klein.
We're going to go to Cecilia Vega, our correspondent who has been out there by telephone right now. Cecilia, quite a scene outside the arena, we understand. What have you been seeing?
Yeah, I mean, Rick, boy, inside this arena, things are jumping, people are having a good time, but outside, just a few minutes ago, people were pretty upset. I'm standing by one of the main entrances to the arena right now, inside the hall. It appears that, well, Secret Service and the fire marshal temporarily put this arena under lockdown, and people couldn't get inside. We were watching a crowd grow, initially, I guess, from inside, looking out the windows, probably a crowd of 200 or so people. And what caught my attention was, one by one, a handful were being able to become allowed through the door, and there was some pushing going on. People were literally pushed up against the glass. After, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, perhaps more, that's just when I started to notice this scene. They were eventually allowed to come back in, and really that crowd was much bigger than 200. I'm not really sure how many, but hundreds of people couldn't get inside. And I can only imagine what it would be like if they were still stuck out there. They would not have campers.
So it seems like it's let up a little bit, but it was potential for a pretty ugly scene outside as people crushed to get in. We learned that President Obama is going to be in the hall tonight. That's got to only increase the demand for the very precious seats in here.
Yeah, and you know, I was down on the floor last night when the First Lady was giving her address, and I'll tell you, it was jam-packed. I was standing near the Illinois delegation, and literally the aisles were packed with people. I can't imagine what it's going to be like tonight for President Clinton and tomorrow for President Obama, especially now with this change of venue. We do know that the fire marshal has been in this building all day long. They were talking to us earlier during our live talk for World News, making sure the aisles were cleared. I'm looking at a scene of law enforcement officers and fire marshals still standing by this main front door, I think just keeping tabs on this situation, making sure this crowd size doesn't get out of control in here.
All right, ABC's Cecilia Vega, thanks so much for checking in. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Sure. Joining us once again, our friend from Univision, Mariana Atencio. Thank you so much for coming up here.
I was locked out.
You
were?
were?
Really? Tell us what it was like out there. Give us
Mayor Castro's twin, Joaquin, was right next to me. So if he wasn't getting in, I knew that I had no chance of getting in.
Well, what was it like out there? Was it scary? And did you feel like you were being crushed by people?
The sweltering heat, Amy.
Okay.
I don't want to share anymore.
Okay. But you're here and you're safe. Could you tell us a little bit about who's up here on the stage right now?
This is the Latin Oprah Winfrey, you know, with her Pa'lante mi gente. She's a Cuban Democrat, which is a rare animal among sorts. And, you know, she's rallying the Latina vote for President Obama, no doubt. She's a very influential leader in the community. And before her, we heard from Benita Vélez. Benita is a dreamer. She's 27 years old. I interviewed her this morning. And her story is actually amazing because she came to this country when she was 8, but after having 2 bachelors, she found herself in a deportation center. And her lawyer basically said, you need to get media attention. So she wrote a bunch of emails, and it was one person from the New York Times responded. An op-ed came out saying, don't deport Benita Vélez, March 2009, and now she's here at this podium. So, you know, it's really been 180 for her.
So what has her role been like in the Latino community? How important is her presence up here on a stage like this tonight?
Cristina Saralegui is huge. She's even huge in Latin America with the older voters. So those are also voters that you want to get out to the polls. She's not so big with the younger generation, but more of the immigrants that came from Latin America in the 60s, the 70s, and 80s really look up to this
Is she very
woman.
political? Does she have a reputation for getting involved in politics?
No, this is actually the first time that she's gotten involved in politics, and I think it's a role that suits her well. She was with Univision, then with Telemundo, so, you know, this just seems natural for her tonight. And she's been also in all of the Obama Spanish-speaking ads, so she's, in that sense, you know, the Craig Romney in this campaign.
She's the Craig Romney of the Democrats, or the Oprah for Latinos.
And she's a Cuban Democrat. So
right, so she fits in a very interesting bill.
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
Not very typical.
Exactly.
Right.
But also, I wanted to point out that I spoke with a lot of Dreamers today, in particular Benita, whom we heard from, and Gaby Pacheco as well. And they were saying that, you know, still in Texas, where Benita's from, she can't get a driver's license. Gaby was telling me that they can't get health benefits from Obamacare. So it's really bittersweet for them, and they're struggling whether to bring all of these subjects up right now because of the 2 months we have ahead in the campaign and the small victory that they attained now. So let's see what happens.
Maria Atencio from Univision, thank you so much for braving those crowds. That sounds like it's quite a scene
All
out
to
there.
make it up
This
here.
is the place to be.
That's
no
right.
doubt.
This is the place to be. Thank you so much,
Thank
Mariana.
you very
See you
much.
guys
Really
tomorrow.
appreciate it. Well, we do understand that the crowds have lessened a little bit. It's gotten a lot better outside the arena, which we can only be hopeful for. It is going to be quite a scene, though, tonight. Amy, I'm trying to think if there's anything in recent memory where you have a former president out of office now for some time coming out there to do the literal embrace of the current president for re-election. Walter Shapiro earlier told us that maybe the closest analogy, you have to go all the way back to 1964 with Eisenhower out there for Goldwater, when you're not talking about a direct successor, reaching back into the past for that kind of support.
That's being that. Well, we are now joined by somebody who knows a little bit about politics from the other side, meaning that you are not part of the. You were once part of the campaign. Now you're on the other side.
From
of
both
the
sides.
campaign.
Now I'm part of the
I've
solution.
There you go.
You've seen it from both sides now, right?
Right.
That's your theme song.
The
Yeah.
clouds, the rain.
That's right.
the
All right.
sun.
So Bill Burton, for those of you who don't know who this is, he is somewhat ubiquitous now on the circuit, on the TV circuit, talking about his group, which is Priorities USA.
Action.
Action. All right. Well
Action.
said.
Which means that this is a super PAC that is supportive of President Obama. All right, let's break it down, Bill.
Okay.
How badly is President Obama going to get outspent between today and November 6th?
Very badly.
And how can that possibly happen? He is the incumbent president of the United States of America.
I know, but here's the problem. You've got all these guys in the oil industry and on Wall Street who have a real vested interest in making sure that Mitt Romney's elected president so that he deregulates the oil industry and Wall Street, and they make all that money back. I saw an analysis that Sheldon Adelson would actually make $100 million back just in tax reform if the Ryan plan gets passed. So for these guys, you know, on the Republican side, that money's not that big of a deal. On the Democratic side, people aren't giving for the same kinds of reasons. They care about equality. They care about the environment. They care about judges. You know, most of our contributions come from the entertainment community. They're not going to sell more movie tickets because Barack Obama gets reelected president. They just care about the issues that are important to Democrats.
Second question that's related to that: if he gets outspent, is potential for him to lose the election because of it, or is he going to have the resources he needs anyway?
I think Democrats should be very nervous because if Karl Rove and the Koch brothers have all this money and hundreds of millions of dollars come sweeping in over President Obama and over Democrats, then yes, in a close election, that could be the difference. So we're concerned about it, but that's why we're fighting so hard. We're glad we saw a big uptick in donations last month. We got our friend Mayor Emanuel helping out now, and you know, things are moving in the right direction, but there is an urgency to making sure that we do the work that we do to make sure we have the resources we need to make an impact.
So you're
here.
spinning around the convention here. Are you collecting checks as you go along? I mean, is it you go in for active solicitations? How does it work when you're a big superstar like Bill Burton at this convention?
Well, I don't know what the big superstar Bill Burton is doing, but what I'm doing out there is we're talking to donors. This is the biggest collection of Democrats that happens every 4 years. So we're just trying to tell people what we've been doing, what our plans are going forward, and you know, it's going pretty well. I did pick up a $500,000 check yesterday.
Congratulations.
Does somebody
Is that
just
fun?
write it to you and then you just like put it in your pocket? How does that work?
That does sometimes happen. They just write it.
So you're walking around with a $500,000 check.
I don't have it on me right now.
Oh, we're going to show or tell.
I want to see what that looks like.
Maybe you could draw it on the iPad later. That'll be work.
Okay, but just going back to the spending part of this for a moment, you're going to have to make some hard decisions as well as the Obama campaign about where to put those resources. Tell us where you guys are spending money right now. And at the end of the day, Bill, are you going to be able to spend money? Are you going to be spending money in North Carolina?
Mm-hmm. First of all, why are you yelling at me?
I can't hear myself because I'm so excited.
You're so fired up.
Fired up about this.
Second of all, I think
Go for it.
I think the top states are probably Florida, Ohio, Virginia.
Okay.
Those are the top tier. And then after that, you've got Iowa, you've got Colorado. You know, you've got this mishmash of Nevada, New Hampshire, states like that. North Carolina, the polls show it very competitive.
Uh-huh.
They show it very, very competitive.
We don't read through between lines very well. What does
No.
that mean, very
No.
competitive?
No.
What is that supposed to...
No.
Are you on camera? Is that what you're asking? You're like looking around for someone else here.
Is this thing on?
Yeah, exactly.
No, look, I mean,
It's tough.
right now, it is a very tough state. But the polls show that the president's support has been pretty durable in a tough political situation. And so I think that it is a place that could definitely be in President Obama's column come Election Day.
Where do you put Wisconsin?
Wisconsin's one to watch. You know, there's no doubt that after...
Are you spending money there right now?
We are. We are. There's no doubt that Paul Ryan's pick definitely had an impact on what voters in Wisconsin were thinking. But Paul Ryan's a lot more popular than Mitt Romney is in that state. And Mitt Romney's policies are very unpopular in that state to a tremendous degree. So we think that, you know, it's gotten more competitive. That might be a problem that can be fixed.
Finally, Boehne. We haven't heard that much Boehne talk back on this stage, but do you still feel like that is the most fertile ground in terms of making the case against Mitt Romney?
No, if you look at what our plans were this entire cycle, we did the ads about Mitt Romney's private sector experience as the groundwork to lead up to the Ryan plan. Because when we talked to voters about the Ryan plan in focus groups, they were like, wow, that is crazy. When we said Mitt Romney supports it, they wouldn't believe us. They didn't believe that a candidate for national office could possibly support it. So we had to lay the groundwork that here's this guy who made his money firing middle-class folks, canceling their health benefits, and walks away with millions even when the companies went bankrupt. So that in the fall, we could start to make the argument that, you know, this is the kind of guy who would cut taxes on the wealthy and raid Medicare to do it and raid education to do it. And so that's kind of where we are. So now we're going to be talking about a more forward-looking argument, which is what would a President Romney mean for the American people?
All right, Bill Burton, Priorities USA Action.
Goodbye, Bill.
Collecting checks, getting yelled at. He's, you know, day in the life of Bill Burton. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, my friend.
Thanks,
All right,
Bill.
bye.
Yeah, I'd like to spend a day with those kind of checks. What do you think? Is
I would
it
be
that easy?
very, very, very nervous about losing that. But listen, the reality is these guys are very excited about the fact they raised $10 million. It's an impressive amount of money, but it is nowhere near what Republicans have been able to spend. And look, the Obama campaign made a gamble. They said we're going to spend the bulk of our money, outspend Romney and Republicans early on. They're going to make the case against Mitt Romney early on, hope that sticks against him. There has been talk, the Obama campaign, for a long time now that spending after Labor Day is not as important as the amount that you spent before.
Right.
We'll see if that works. We are joined right now, very excited to be joined by the governor of Colorado, John Hickenlooper. Glad to have you here.
My pleasure.
Are you sad we're not in Denver again? Because I am. I love Colorado. I love Colorado.
We had the downtown alive. There was so much excitement. It was great for the city and the state, but to be honest, I'm a little happier to be a participant, an observer,
right,
rather than the host.
As mayor, it's very hard. Yeah, there's a lot like going on.
And especially, you know, we do TV in the morning back to the East Coast, so I have to be at the convention site at 5 a.m. Means I got up at 4. As you know, there's a lot going on in the evening, so there was no rest for the wicked.
A little bit.
So talk to us a little about the message you brought tonight about the West, about Colorado. How important is that to Democratic prospects? And is there a particular Obama message that works there? We remember the moment in Denver, but we're not in Denver anymore.
Right. No, I think there's a strong message that Colorado and the West, it's not just about the trappers and the rugged individuals. It is about community. The wagon train was the real vehicle that settled the West and allowed people to take over and build lives in that inhospitable terrain. So as much as we value independence and that kind of whole creed of the West, we also recognize that we work together. And when I opened my brew pub back, I got laid off in '86 and opened it in '88 when I didn't. When you've only got like 5 minutes and 32 seconds, or you leave out some of the details. But yeah, we went into this part of Denver called Lower Downtown, which is there to the convention.
Oh yeah, Lodo.
The rent was $1 a square foot per year. It was abandoned wasteland, and we worked with all the other restaurateurs. I put up a sign marketing some of the competition, and my staff said, "You can't do that. You can't market this dog eat dog. You can't market the competition." I said, wait a second. Maybe the real competition is, people sitting at home on their couch. We got to get them out the door to enjoy life with their family and friends. And we started buying pint glasses together, do joint advertising, create a sense of place. Back then there were maybe 25 restaurants downtown. Now there are 350. And that's, I think when you work together, when you create that sense of, well, we're going to all work together. We're still competing. But, I say collaboration. There's a guy named Alex Bogusky. He and Rob Schuev, they've been saying, collaboration is the new competition, right? And as we look at the challenges the country faces, We just gotta work. If we're gonna fix education and really reform it so it works, that's gonna be everybody working together.
So tell me this: you ran as you're something of an outsider. You're not a typical candidate. You weren't a typical politician when you ran for mayor of Denver. But you know what the opinion of politicians is right now, right? It's very, very low, and of Congress. Isn't it difficult for Democrats to come make the case for how important government is in terms of giving people access and all these benefits when people think that government is essentially broken?
Well, they think it's either broken or bloated. But, you know, I mean, my mother, I couldn't go into this stuff, but my mom was, you know, all my grandparents were Republicans. She was raised in a family of Republicans. But when she was widowed twice, she raised 4 kids, and she was a Democrat because she thought government had to work. She didn't want it to be bigger. She wanted it to be small. She grew up in the Depression. She'd wash off tinfoil saran wrap and reuse it. But she thought government should have to work. And I think that's part of what the approach that people have in the West towards government is. We want it smaller. I mean, people, it's amazing. So many people, they don't want to pay taxes. No one likes paying taxes. But you're willing to pay taxes if they're not wasted. So what we've been trying to do is say, all right, how can we use technology, and as baby boomers retire, we don't have to do layoffs, but how can we make government a little smaller, but do more and really to help people more, make sure education reform works, make sure health care covers more people but still controls costs.
This argument for government, we've heard echoes of it throughout the arena, throughout the speeches over this week. How hard is it for Democrats to make, and how important do you think it is in terms of making that contrast with Governor Romney and the Republicans?
Well, I don't think this notion that you could have a smaller government is not uniquely Republican, right? When I was mayor of Denver for almost 8 years, and from when I started to when I left, we had 7% fewer employees, right? And yet we cut chronic homelessness by 65%. We had all kinds of expanded services we did. I think there's a way to do that both. I think Governor Romney is on the extreme part of that, but I mean, there's some concern that, you know, if you begin trying to cut government too much, it stops working, and that is, I mean, then you see what happens. If that happens, all kinds of consequences are unavoidable.
Okay, I realize it's 2012. We're about to listen at some point to the president who's making the case, running for re-election. But we, of course, are already talking about 2016. And there's a name that keeps coming up as a potential 2016 candidate. It happens to be the governor of Colorado. Yeah. So do you want to give us any of your thinking here on what you want to do next?
I think most of the lists about 2016 don't include my name.
Oh, yes, they do.
And I think
yes, they do. I can Google it right now. You're on there.
It has a lot of syllables, but it usually makes the list.
Yeah. I can't pronounce it. I know. Yeah. You know, I don't think you can do both, right? I don't think you can put together a PAC and start going to Iowa and New Hampshire and making speeches. And if you want to be the state where you really figure out how do we expand coverage for healthcare, but control costs, right? Improve outcomes, but control costs. If we want to get education reform, but also build the relationship with teachers' unions, and, you know, if teachers are going to be held accountable, they've got to be the ones helping us decide who are the good teachers, how do they help the teachers that need improvement, how do they improve them. I don't think you can do both. So
we're not going to see you in Iowa in 2013.
You're not going to see me in Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina. Not that I don't love those states. And you're not going to see me putting together a PAC or out trying to raise money or build a network. I think I love being governor. I love going all over Colorado. It's not a bad state.
No, I mean, I'll go with you.
Exactly.
Amy says this like 14 times an hour. I love Colorado. I don't know what it is. Not even just when we have Colorado guests. It just kind of comes out sometimes.
I just say it. You have a good excuse.
I need to ask you, the White House released the microbrew for the White House brew.
Wasn't that amazing?
Now, did you look at the recipe? Did you read the recipe? Is it good?
I memorized that.
So, all right, is it a good beer? Is it going to be a good beer?
You can never tell because so much of it's science and a recipe, but part of it's art. And how they've got the White House chefs doing this, which is incredible. I mean, the question really you should be reporting on is how hard did the president have to lobby the chefs? Did they jump to the opportunity, or was this kind of a twisting of the arm?
But what's in it? You see it as a brewer. What is in it that you said, wow, that's interesting? I didn't see that coming.
Well, they're using their own honey. Well, yeah, and certainly honey is a great way to kind of lighten a beer, make it, especially in the summer, make it more refreshing. But they've got their own apiary, so they're raising their own honey. They're using it to make their own beer. I mean, it's almost like a victory garden in a glass.
That's a good one. All right, but are you still like making your own beer? Do you go into your garage, or if there? I don't know if there's a garage at the governor's mansion or something like that in the basement. Are you down there, like, still testing out
Monkeying
brews?
around a little bit.
No, but every town I go to in Colorado, when I ran for governor, every evening at the end we'd have an event, and we get just not a fundraiser, but just people to come together. It was every time it was a microbrewery or a brew pub, and I still try to stay in touch. You know, when I opened the Wine Coop Brewing Company in 1988, and I don't own it anymore. My partner bought me out in 2008, but we were about 110th brewery in the United States. The country had come down to like 80, and so we were about 110. Now there are over 2,100 breweries, right? And they make about 5.7% of the total beer, but they create more than 50% of the jobs in the entire brewing industry. So a small volume, but huge job creator. And that's, you know, I mean, what's not to love about that? And not only that, you look at beer, 1 beer, 2 beers a night, that's good for you. Most people think that's kind of healthy. Charge more for it. Make a really high-quality beer, and it creates an economic incentive just to have 1 or 2.
So this is it. This is
The beer
solving the
stimulus. What else do we need? It is. You see, beer is important to President Obama politically. He's out there quaffing beers, not just the recipe release. He's out there. He's like a college freshman. Hey, let's hit it.
Well, that's not quite true. But if you look at the president, he's always liked beer, right? And the bottom line is, you look at. I mean, one of the things that I don't think gets covered. He loves basketball. That whole when his 49th birthday, he had that pickup basketball game. You got all the NBA stars.
Dream team, yeah.
And they had 3 pros and then 2 amateurs on 4 teams, and they played round robin. He didn't even let the press. No one covered it. He did it for the love of it, right? And that, I think, his beer culture, his ability, his love of sports and basketball, that's just who he is. It's natural. It's like him trying to get home 4 or 5 nights a week to have dinner with his daughters.
But tell us honestly, when you see him drinking a Bud Light, what do you think?
A little bit of you think, ugh.
Well, he's in a different political situation.
All right.
Letting him slide.
That's
Governor
very good.
Hickenlooper, thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
thirsty after this conversation. I don't know what it is. I can't
Me
figure
too.
it out. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much.
I hope you signed in and maybe draw your ideal beer, if nothing else, on the iPad.
I should have done that. I didn't. I'll have to go back and
You
do
get
it.
2. We'll give you 2. Governors get 2. You can try again. Go for it.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Governor, so
Thank
much.
you.
Well-
An interesting resume if he does, but I think it was pretty unequivocal there about the prospects of a White House run. Not in the cards as far as he's concerned, because the desire to be a good governor. It's hard to square the two as far as he's. Lots of folks do it, as you know.
Right,
They
he
keep that day
can do
job.
both. Right, yeah, they can. But and look, he's obviously had quite a year between the fires that are raging through the state and, of course, the tragedy in Aurora at the movie theater. So. We're going to switch gears a little bit now from Colorado and beer drinking, which we spent an inordinate amount of time on talking about beer, but it's not bad. We're now going to talk about the internet. And joining us, Phoebe Connolly from Yahoo News. Phoebe, one thing that I pulled up on my Twitter feed that was interesting and I can say I've never seen before.
Please.
Former Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin, of course, Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton.
Yep. Topical.
Was that very topical? So we're connecting the two. He was at a big event here in Charlotte. It had a pool. Apparently, he slipped in. He's wearing a suit and everything. Fell in the pool.
Yes. Yes, I saw that photo as well. There were several reports. We should say all reporters that I saw tweeting about this. And the photo of him in the suit, he's sort of drenched. It's kind of clinging to him.
Yeah.
So, it's the new
But
wire
he's okay.
service. As far as I know, yes.
All right. Now, Phoebe, you've been very good at showing us just how Twitter has affected the way that we cover conventions, the way that people interact with conventions. And we've heard this about the intensity, how many tweets per minute are certain speakers getting. So you put together for us a comparison of the speakers thus far from Tampa on out, right?
I did. And let me just start by saying that I sat down with Twitter to get these numbers today, and they gave me one stat which I think really helps kind of put this all in perspective. They looked at all the tweets that were sent about the Republican National Convention, Saturday to Saturday, 4 million tweets, roughly.
4 million tweets.
Yeah. Yesterday, DNC, 2 million tweets, just yesterday. So we're already seeing a much larger volume. And that's borne out in what you were talking about, which was the most discussed convention speakers. So what the chart that you're seeing here is, this is the tweets per minute, which is Twitter's sort of internal, how they're gauging how much excitement, how much conversation is happening. It's a
And this
real
can be
time.
good or bad, right?
Right, it could be good and bad. It's just how much conversation is happening around these folks, and you can see, and we ordered them, in terms of when they spoke. So Mitt Romney eclipsed his running mate, but then he was eclipsed by Michelle Obama last night.
All right, now, the other really important issue is the hashtag issue.
Yes.
And as you may know, we have a hashtag.
Yes, we got one yesterday.
You got one yesterday.
So how did it do?
No. We know how it's done. It's like it's exploded Twitter, right? I mean, it's been headphones.
Well, I looked. I really delved into how it's done over the past day, and it did tweak at 11, or peaked at tweaked. That's the Twitter peak. It's the tweak. No, you don't think so?
But good try. Okay.
All right. So at 11:28 last night, it peaked with 31 mentions.
31 mentions.
That's what we got. 31. So all right.
That was the most that headphones received in the past 24 hours. I'm monitoring it though. I'm going to report back if I see anything good.
So I assume that's just the beginning. I mean, this is how trends start.
Yes,
we should give the context on it. Cal Penn gave it to us.
Yes, he did.
He gifted us this hashtag. He went out there on stage with a slightly larger audience on that stage behind us and said and suggested Sexy Face. How is Sexy Face done throughout the night? It was big last night, right?
It was big. I mean, it peaked obviously when he mentioned it on stage, when it was a conversation point, but you've seen it continues to be used and to be sort of tossed around as people are talking about the convention.
Phoebe, anything else that you're seeing out there that is an interesting new trend?
Well, what we're really doing is kind of looking forward. I mean, as we see, Michelle Obama really kind of blew us out of the water last night. Bill Clinton is a very popular figure. I sat down with Andrew Fitzgerald and I said, well, is Bill Clinton going to break Twitter tonight? Are people
going to break Twitter?
So excited about Bill Clinton that it's broken. And I was reassured that Twitter is unbreakable at this point.
It is unbreakable.
That's the official statement from Twitter.
But you gave us you gave us really the high mark, which was Usain Bolt, right, at the Olympics.
At the Olympics when he won the 200-meter gold. Okay, that was 80,000 tweets per minute. Last night, Michelle Obama, 28,000 tweets per minute. So the question is, where's Bill going to
Amy
fall
and Rick? Somewhere close by,
Headphones
right
beneath
right near there.
Headphones right below there.
Yeah. All right. So for Bill Clinton, more than 28,000 tweets per minute would make him the most tweeted about
at the convention
speaker at the convention thus far. Okay.
Or he could overtake Usain Bolt. I think that should be his goal for the night.
All right, Phoebe Connolly from Yahoo, thanks so much for being here. We all talk about here in the media, maybe there'll be a contested floor fight, a floor fight at the convention. Newt Gingrich promised it.
He did.
He didn't deliver. It didn't really happen, but it has happened in the past. Take a look at one time recently.
The efforts on the nomination is over. My name will not be placed in nomination, but the efforts for democratic principles must and will continue. Well, things worked out a little different from the way I thought. But let me tell you, I still love New York. The work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die.
And that is the 1980 Democratic National Convention. You'll never get more drama than that, Amy, I think it's fair to say. We're here all night, as we've been talking about, the live stream at abcnews.com, at Yahoo News as well, also in the YouTube Politics channel. Hashtagging at DNC 2012, hashtagging at Headphones every once in a while if you want to get us up from, I forgot the number already. It was so huge. So many zeros attached to it when Phoebe talked about that.
I think we can make it to 50, right? Hashtag Headphones. Now, the interesting thing about 1980 wasn't just the fact that there was a floor fight, but there are a lot of Republicans who believe that this election is going to be a rerun of 1980. That, in fact, like Jimmy Carter, This president has a struggling economy. This president is going to have trouble winning back those states that he was able to get in 2008, and that ultimately the economy, more than anything else, is going to drive this election. We've heard from a lot of our speakers here tonight who are telling us, in fact, that it is going to be a choice about two visions of the government. It's not going to be simply about where the unemployment number is on November 6th.
That's right. All about making that choice. Behind us, we're actually seeing several former employees of Bain Capital making the case. Some of these folks are become quite famous because they're showing up in ads. A lot of these folks, the stories have been told all the way from 1994 on. You've heard them over and over again. The script hasn't changed that much. It's been effective before, and sometimes it's been ineffective, but they're trying it once again.
No, and this is the strongest argument that even many Republicans say that Democrats have against President Obama against Mitt Romney, is the fact that he has this record, this business record that in many ways these guys can come and talk about and suggest that the government that he wants to put together is going to look like the business record that he put together. That's exactly what they've been trying to do.
All right, we're pleased to be joined now by Michelle Rhee, who's the founder and CEO of Students First, and of course also ran the schools in Washington, D.C. And I want to ask you, because we've heard a little bit of talk today from some Obama folks that they think that education reform could be a major cause of a second term. They see the energy out there. What do the contours look like? What are the prospects for new education legislation as you see it?
Well, I think that it's the possibilities are really great. In the first term, President Obama and Secretary Arne Duncan really were incredibly aggressive with their Race to the Top initiative. And what that did was it sparked more legislative changes to policy at the state level than I think we've ever seen in that kind of a period of time. So they've sort of laid the groundwork for it, and now I think we're ready to be even more aggressive.
You know, there are a lot of Republicans. In fact, I think there are many Republicans who say they like you more than any other political figure, right? Because they like the idea that you've been putting forward about choice and those sorts of issues. Tell us, though, and when you talk to Democrats and Republicans, is there an ability for them to really come together on this issue, or are there going to be those little things that are going to keep them separated, most specifically the issue of teacher tenure?
So I actually think that regardless of the outcome of this election, that the American people are tired of the gridlock in Washington, D.C., and that this is the one issue that potentially the politicians could come together on. They'd have the cover of being able to say, okay, we're going to put partisan politics aside in the name of what's good for kids. But, you know, I sit in a lot of conversations with Democrats. I sit in a lot of conversations with Republicans, and they agree on a whole lot more than they disagree on.
But is it that tenure issue that really is the major stumbling block?
I mean, you have Democratic legislatures and governors who have taken the tenure issue on. I mean, you had a Democratic legislature in New Jersey that passed tenure reform unanimously. In Connecticut, there's a Democratic governor and Democratic legislature. They're taking the issue on. Colorado took it on. So I think that's a new day in the Democratic Party around education reform. I think that you're seeing more and more high-profile Democrats, including Mayor Villaraigosa and Cory Booker, my husband, Kevin Johnson, who's the mayor of Sacramento. You can't get more high-profile in terms of some of those folks, and they're saying, look, we support teachers, we support unions, but where there are significant problems, we've got to be able to challenge the teachers' unions to come along with us.
Where do you see as the biggest sticking points right now? What are the forces that you think politicians need to be taking on more? And look, everyone wants better schools, everyone has different visions for it, but where are the holdups right now, the logjams?
So I'd say one is around teacher quality and in particular teacher evaluations, because once we can put rigorous teacher evaluations in place, then we can change the way that teachers get paid. So the most highly effective teachers get paid a lot more money. We can lay teachers off based on quality instead of seniority. So that's one. The second is around choice, making sure that no family ever feels like they're trapped in a failing school, and that means giving all families options. And then the last is around, I think, fiscal responsibility. We have in this country over the last 2 to 3 decades increased the amount of money that we're spending per child more than double, almost triple. and yet the results have remained absolutely stagnant. And so we have to start looking at where are the dollars going and how can we ensure that we're getting a better return on investment. When I was in D.C., we spent more money per kid than almost any other city in the entire country, and yet our results were at the absolute bottom. And when we started to try to figure out why, it was because only 40% of our $1 billion budget went into the classroom, went into the school. The rest was going towards, these sort of structural administration,
right,
and this bloated bureaucracy.
All right, so we always come back to this in every election. Everybody says education's really important, but they also say the federal government isn't the driver of this debate. It is, as you pointed out, it's a local issue. It's your local school district. It's your governor. So what role does the federal government, and what role can it play? What role should it play in this?
Well, we have to have a federal role in education.
And why? In what way?
Because look, if one of the things that I disagreed very strongly with the Romney white paper on education is the fact that he said, well, the localities know best what they need to do, and so let's just have them do it. But the reality is that we've let the local, governments do their thing, and this is where it's gotten us. We're 25th out of 34 nations right now. I think that there has to be a balance. I think the responsibility of the federal government is to set the standards, to say that we shouldn't have lower standards for the kids in Mississippi than we do for the kids in Massachusetts. So consistent standards, and then to, let the money flow, but then to hold those states accountable, right? So the states and the local jurisdictions should have the flexibility to try to get to the goals the way they want to, but if they can't get there, then the federal government has to hold them accountable.
All right, Michelle Rhee, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
A lot of big issues coming up, and I do think it's interesting. It'll come up in the second term for sure. Make sure you sign in on our iPad guest book.
Okay.
Doodle something, make it creative, make it fun. We're having a great time here.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. So we're coming up on the primetime hour, as you know, Amy, just so you have a little bit of a rundown of what to expect after the top of the hour. Elizabeth Warren is the big beginning of the hour speaker, and this guy named Bill, who they say he's a decent public speaker.
And the other big news, of course, in the last few minutes has been the fact that the stadium was shut down for a little while. The arena, the doors were locked. People were left out because they were bringing in the current president of the United States, and of course security was very important. They wanted to make sure that they got him in and out safely. People are now streaming in, but as we saw from some of our guests, it wasn't particularly fun.
No.
It's pretty muggy out here in Charlotte, and so
one guest we're glad made it.
Yes. You made it in.
I made it in.
Well done.
Good job. All right, Senator Mark Warner from the Commonwealth of Virginia, my home state now, so welcome.
Thank you.
You are one of the centrists in the Senate. You've been working very hard with Republicans, trying to come up with these bipartisan solutions all the time. We always see it's
right.
like, well, Mark Warner's doing something with the Republican. Maybe we can get this debt ceiling thing. Maybe we can get this deficit thing. Are you just so dispirited by now? Because nothing has happened.
Well, there are days, there are weeks, even some months where you feel like you're pounding your head against the wall. But I can't think of any issue that's bigger, any issue that's more important to our future, any issue that would do more for job creation than the ability to get a debt deal done. And we know what the parameters are going to look like. There's been the president's proposal, Simpson-Bowles, my so-called Gang of Six, Rivlin-Domenici. There are lots of proposals. They're all basically the same. We've just got to get it done. I think there are the votes there to get it. And my hope will be is that I hope the president wins, but regardless whether the president wins or Governor Romney wins, my hope is our group will be able to present them with at least a bipartisan starting point, because anybody that thinks there's going to be a Democratic-only or Republican-only solution to this problem just didn't commit it to reality.
You may or may not know this, but the new Bob Woodward book comes out next week. It looks a lot at this debt deal. Copies of it are just starting to emerge. I read a copy. I have a story up online about it. One of the things that it identifies as something that stood in the way of a major debt deal was the Gang of Six. Intriguingly, the timing of it seems to have pushed President Obama to go back for more revenue. What do you think in retrospect about the Senate efforts at that time to try to move something along?
I think the irony of that is that the administration and others knew we were working on this for a long period of time. We weren't sure we were ever going to get the kind of breakout opportunity. There were members of our gang that had kind of dropped out and took a hiatus for a while. We were at the kind of end of the period. We presented our plan, and a remarkable thing happened. It was actually what I thought I was getting, the kind of institution I thought I was getting elected to. Folks in this room, 49 senators sitting around, all of them, except for 2, said, okay, you know what? This is a good plan. Count me in. And it took off. And matter of fact, the president, I think to his credit, said that same day,
right,
you know, Gang of 6, it's a good plan. Let's go for it. I think it didn't get its full attention in those last few days. Unfortunately, we then ended up with this debacle of the debt ceiling, followed up by a failure of the super committee. We've got one more chance. I feel at times a little bit like the little boy who cried wolf. We keep missing these deadlines and the world doesn't come crashing down. But this next one with the fiscal cliff at the end of the year could be the time that causes either great harm or the positive side is, if we get it done, both the signal it would send to the markets, as well as the fact that kind of the psychic value that the American people actually saw their elected representatives putting country ahead of party, could be a pretty darn good thing.
You know, the other day we had Kathy McMorris Rogers, who's a Republican, say that she knows that the Romney team is actually starting to reach out, talking to Republicans in the House, even thinking about Democrats that talked about what to do in a lame duck Congress with this so-called fiscal cliff. Are you hearing that the Romney folks and Obama folks are reaching out and talking about a strategy for a lame duck?
I've not heard from the Romney folks. The challenge is that, you know, all these plans out there have had a mix of cuts in revenue. You know, whether it's 2-to-1 cuts over revenue, 3-to-1 cuts over revenue, that's still in the ballpark. But they've all included a substantial amount of revenue. The challenge with Governor Romney's approach, even though I know he's got good business credentials, is that he has said he won't do any deal with additional revenue. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, with spending at an all-time high and revenues at a 70-year low, the only time we've had a budget balance has been when they've been in the middle. We've got to do both.
All right, Senator Mark Warner, thank you so much for being here
me.
with the great state of Virginia. Appreciate you being on the program.
Appreciate it.
Make sure you sign in. I want something creative now.
Done.
You just want to make sure, you know, what would be memorable.
Yeah, it would be memorable.
Okay, good.
He knows something about technology, right? You made something.
Eked out a living with cell phones.
Yeah.
Eked out a little living. All right, yes. Senator Warner, thank you. Right now in the convention for Sandra Fluck, one of our guests here on the program yesterday, of course, vaulted to a strange kind of political fame recently. She's here in the primetime area. Let's take a look at some of what she has to say.
Warnings of that future are not distractions. They are not imagined. That future could become real. In that America, your new president could be a man who stands by when a public figure tries to silence a private citizen with hateful slurs. A man who won't stand up to those slurs or to any of the extreme, bigoted voices in his own party. It would be an America in which you have a new vice president who co-sponsored a bill that would allow pregnant women to die preventable deaths in our emergency rooms. An America in which states humiliate women by forcing us to endure invasive ultrasounds that we don't want, and our doctors say that we don't need. An America in which access to birth control is controlled by people who will never use it. An America in which politicians redefine rape, and victims are victimized all over again. In which someone decides which domestic violence victims deserves access to services and which don't. We know what this America would look like. And in a few short months, that's the America that we could be. But that's not the America that we should be, and it's not who we are. We've also seen another America that we could choose. In that America, we'd have the right to choose. It's an America in which no one can charge us more than men for the exact same health insurance. In which no one can deny us affordable access to the cancer screenings that could save our lives. in which we decide when to start our families. An America in which our president, when he hears that a young woman has been verbally attacked, thinks of his daughters, not his delegates or his donors. And in which our president stands with all women and strangers come together and reach out and lift her up. And then, instead of trying to silence her, you invite me here. And you give me this microphone to amplify our voice. That's the difference. Over the last 6 months, I've seen what these two futures look like. And 6 months from now, we're all going to be living in one future or the other, but only one. A country where our president either has our back or turns his back. A country that honors our foremothers by moving us forward, or one that forces our generation to refight battles that they already won. A country where we mean it when we talk about personal freedom. Or one where that freedom doesn't apply to our bodies or to our voices. We talk often about choice. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to choose.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome former CEO and co-founder of Costco, Jim Sinegal.
Former CEO of Costco, business owners out there to rebut some of what Mitt Romney said last week. We just heard from Sandra Fluck. Of course, she got the crowd really fired up, talking a little about the choice issue, talking about the choice ahead for voters as well, Amy.
Yeah, you even saw at one point that Joe Biden and his wife standing up and cheering her on. This was a very hard-hitting speech. We've heard about, for the last couple of days, there have been some subtle jabs and some references that were a little oblique. This was really a pretty direct appeal to women, saying, if you elect Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney, they're going to take women back, women's health care back to a previous era. This was not subtle at all.
No, I think that is fair to say. All right, once again, we are streaming all night long at abcnews.com, at Yahoo News as well. If you want to watch the podium action, we're streaming that at our website as well. We're also available on the YouTube Politics channel. We are hashtagging it DNC 2012 and having a great time with our guests as the night goes on. And Amy, we're having the night sort of build to these two moments. And you've made the point earlier that you have Elizabeth Warren, you have Bill Clinton. Different ends of the Democratic Party, different appeals to the Democratic Party.
And, you know, we've gotten a preview of the Elizabeth Warren speech, and, you know, what you can see what she's trying to do there is similar to what every single speaker has tried to do, including Michelle Obama, which is tell their own story, their own middle-class upbringing, where they came from, in order to make the case for why this party and this president understands the needs and values of the middle class. We've seen it in our own polling, where President Obama is ahead of Mitt Romney on that question of who do you think looks out for the middle class. They want to expand on that and make it permanent, that lead.
That's exactly right, and they're trying to bring in these middle class values, make President Obama part of that, connect him very directly to that world. All right, we're joined now by Devin Dwyer, ABC News White House correspondent, out there covering the Obama campaign so often. And Devin, what have we learned, first of all, about the president's physical whereabouts tonight? Is he in the building right now? Is he going to be on stage with President Clinton?
He's on his way right now, Rick. They've just left his hotel, so the motorcade's actually rolling here. They should be here any moment. The campaign says he will not be in the First Lady's suite tonight, so we can cross that off our list as to where he'll be. But it's anybody's guess what, I wouldn't rule out a cameo on stage at some point here.
There's an open chair next to you, and that's not a Clint Eastwood reference.
That's right.
So,
I was just going to say, I didn't want to...
We have a good view, if you want
these are prime seats.
to pass it on, that's fine.
Are you extending an invitation?
Yes, it is an open invitation, yes.
So that's the first image that President Obama is going to be making at his own convention, is hugging or holding on to Bill Clinton?
It's remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw the NBC interview today with Bill Clinton. Fascinating stuff. Right before he's going to take the stage here, he gets up, talks about his relationship with the president, and he says very openly, it's not a bromance, it's not a transaction. It's very candid. It's very respectful. He supports him, but very interesting that he talks about that very openly that they've had this tension between them, and it seems like it still persists.
Very interesting that the former president used the word bromance as well.
That's true.
I don't think that shows up in the presidential lexicon very often. What have we heard about what President Clinton's speech is going to be tonight? A lot of anticipation that he's going to find a way to deliver a message to middle class, white working class voters in particular, because he was so successful in connecting with them.
That's right. He said earlier today that he's not going to be focusing on the 1990s. He's not going to emphasize. But certainly that's a big part of this, right? That he's got this credibility that he can speak to, 4 balanced budgets, 4 surpluses, robust job growth. And so he's here to kind of put his imprint on this president. And frankly, Rick, I mean, this stuff is flattery. I mean, this is a president who loves to be buttered up, and to hear President Obama on the campaign trail regularly plugging President Clinton has got to do something for him, and I think he's here to return the favor.
So is he going to be able to make the case for why you're better off today than you were 4 years ago in a way that is more believable or more effective than the other surrogates have been able to do?
That's a big question, right? I mean, we have seen both of them struggle to sell this case. Certainly, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Clinton. I mean, given his popularity and given how many people are going to tune in tonight to see him speak. So this is, even though there's some football on a competing network, the campaign has been pushing this, live streaming, online, really getting people to tune in for this. And so it'll be interesting to see if he can be more effective than
and giving Bill Clinton his own night in the convention as well.
That's right. Very unusual.
I want to ask just briefly about Joe Biden, because we just talked about the new Bob Woodward book. It is coming out next week. ABC News has a copy of it. Diane Sawyer is going to have an interview with Bob Woodward featured next week. There's an intriguing passage in it, Devin, and I'm probably filling you in on this as much as anything else still, but where Joe Biden and Eric Cantor kind of take a step to the side and say to each other privately, if we were running this whole negotiations, I think we'd get a deal done. A rare window into the vice presidential relationship with the president, a suggestion of just a sliver of daylight, and I feel like he's sort of a non-entity here, to be blunt about it. You don't see a lot of Biden energy. We're going to hear from him tomorrow night. He doesn't get his own evening. He's here, but you don't see a lot of TV cutaways. What do you think that the status of that relationship is, the role that they're hoping that Joe Biden is able to play for the campaign?
Well, I think they're actually very tight. I mean, I don't think there's any daylight there, and I think the vice president really cherishes his role as he puts it, the last man in the room. Right. And I think there's a lot of speculation about 2016, and he kind of teased to it the other day, and is not really ruling it out. But he's loving being in the moment, as being kind of the elder statesman of the pair, advising this president on foreign policies, largely, and so it'll be interesting to see him take the stage and have his own time. The campaign says this is not an introduction of President Obama.
Right.
This is a standalone speech. So we'll hear from the vice president that way.
Are you hearing anything about what to expect from this speech? Like President Clinton, President Obama likes to be very hands-on. He's writing in the margins. He's making changes late into the night. What kind of insight have they given you in both the process and the product?
Well, very little. I mean, he's holding this one pretty close, but we do know that he's taken on the role of attack dog. And so I would not be surprised to see some good zingers in classic Joe Biden style to going after Mitt Romney a little bit. And then the president will come on, and as he always does, kind of takes the softer approach. So are
they talking about what the president is doing with this speech and how much he's worked on it and what kind of what kind of back and forth he's having with his aides about it?
Yeah, of all the things we see on the campaign trail is how closely the president really works on his text. In every campaign speech we see, he's finessing. You can tell in his delivery, for those of us who are here, finessing the lines, tossing out ones that don't seem to be working, putting in new ones. We see his speechwriter Jon Favreau on Air Force One all the time, tagging along. I'm sure there are some time spent in the forward cabin talking about this. So we definitely know he's been working on it. We know that he's a perfectionist, so he too will be spending kind of those last minutes finishing up the speech until tomorrow night.
He does know how to give a speech, and it'll be right inside this arena. Devin Dwyer, thanks for being here. Thanks
for having me, guys. Very fun.
Thank you, Devin.
Always fun. We're seeing now, this is Elizabeth Warren, candidate for Senate.
This is my first Democratic convention. I never thought I'd run for the Senate. And I sure never dreamed that I'd be the warm-up act for President Bill Clinton. He's an amazing man who had the good sense to marry one of the coolest women on this planet. I want to give a special shout out to the Massachusetts delegation. I'm counting on you to help me win and to help President Obama win. I'm here tonight to talk about hardworking people. People who get up early, stay up late, cook dinner and help out with homework. People who can be counted on to help their kids, their parents, their neighbors, and a lady down the street whose car broke down. People who work their hearts out but are up against a hard truth. The game is rigged against them. It wasn't always this way. Like a lot of you, I grew up in a family on the ragged edges of the middle class. My daddy sold carpeting and ended up as a maintenance man. After he had a heart attack, my mom worked the phones at Sears so we could hang on to our house. All three of my brothers served in the military. One was career, the second a good union job in construction, and the third started a small business. Me, I was waiting tables at 13 and married at 19. I graduated from public schools and taught elementary school. I have a wonderful husband, 2 great children, and 3 beautiful grandchildren. And I'm grateful down to my toes for every opportunity that America gave me. This is a great country. I grew up in an America that invested in its kids and built a strong middle class that allowed millions of children to rise from poverty and establish secure lives. An America that created Social Security and Medicare so that seniors could live with dignity. An America in which each generation built something solid so that the next generation could build something better. But now, for many years, our middle class has been chipped, squeezed, and hammered. Talk to the construction worker I met from Malden, Massachusetts, who went 9 months without finding work. Talk to the head of a manufacturing company in Franklin, trying to protect jobs but worried about rising costs. Talk to the student in Worcester who worked hard to finish his degree and now he's drowning in debt. Their fight is my fight, and it's Barack Obama's fight too. That's right. Yes. People feel like the system is rigged against them. And here's the painful part. They're right. The system is rigged. Look around. Oil companies guzzle down billions in profits. Billionaires pay lower tax rates than their secretaries. And Wall Street CEOs, the same ones who wrecked our economy and destroyed millions of jobs, still strut around Congress, no shame, demanding favors and acting like we should thank them. Does anyone here have a problem with that? Well, I do too. I do too. I talk to small business owners all across Massachusetts, and not one of them, not one, made big bucks from the risky bets that brought down our economy. I talked to nurses and programmers, salespeople and firefighters, people who bust their tails every day, and not one of them, not one, stashes their money in the Cayman Islands to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. These folks don't resent that someone else made more money. We're Americans. We celebrate success. We just don't want the game to be rigged. We've fought to level the playing field before. About a century ago, when corrosive greed threatened our economy and our way of life, the American people came together under the leadership of Teddy Roosevelt and other progressives to bring our nation back from the brink. We started to take children out of factories and put them in schools. We began to give meaning to the words consumer protection by making food and medicine safe. And we gave the little guys a better chance to compete by preventing the big guys from rigging the markets. We turned adversity into progress because that's what we do. Americans are fighters. We're tough, resourceful, and creative. And if we have the chance to fight on a level playing field, where everyone pays a fair share and everyone has a real shot, then no one can stop us. President Obama gets it because he's spent his life fighting for the middle class. And now he's fighting to level that playing field because we know the economy doesn't grow from the top down, but from the middle class out and the bottom up. That's how we create jobs and reduce the debt. And Mitt Romney, he wants to give tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires, but for middle class families who are hanging on by their fingernails, his plan will hammer them with a new tax hike of up to $2,000. Mitt Romney wants to give billions in breaks to big corporations, but he and Paul Ryan would pulverize financial reform, voucherize Medicare, and vaporize Obamacare. The Republican vision is clear. I got mine, the rest of you are on your own. Republicans say they don't believe in government. Sure they do. They believe in government to help themselves and their powerful friends. After all, Mitt Romney's the guy who said, corporations are people. No, Governor Romney, corporations are not people. People have hearts. They have kids. They get jobs. They get sick. They cry. They dance. They live, they love, and they die. And that matters. That matters. That matters because we don't run this country for corporations. We run it for people. And that's why we need Barack Obama. After the financial crisis, President Obama knew that we had to clean up Wall Street. For years, families had been tricked by credit cards, fooled by student loans, and cheated on mortgages. I had an idea for a consumer financial protection agency to stop the ripoffs. Now, the big banks sure didn't like it, and they marshaled one of the biggest lobbying forces on earth to destroy the agency before it ever saw the light of day. American families didn't have an army of lobbyists on our side. What we had was a president. President Obama leading the way. And when the lobbyists were closing in for the kill, Barack Obama squared his shoulders, planted his feet, and stood firm. And that's how we won. By the way, just a few weeks ago, that little agency caught one of the biggest credit card companies cheating its customers and made it give people back every penny it took, plus millions of dollars in fines. That's what happens when you have a president on the side of the middle class. President Obama believes in a level playing field. He believes in a country where nobody gets a free ride or a golden parachute. A country where anyone who has a great idea and rolls up their sleeves has a chance to build a business. And anyone who works hard can build some security and raise a family. President Obama believes in a country where billionaires pay their taxes just like their secretaries do. And I can't believe I have to say this in 2012, a country where women get equal pay for equal work. He believes in a country where everyone is held accountable, where no one can steal your purse on Main Street or your pension on Wall Street. President Obama believes in a country where we invest in education, in roads and bridges, in science, and in the future, so we can create new opportunities so the next kid can make it big, and the kid after that, and the kid after that. That's what President Obama believes. And that's how we build the economy of the future. An economy with more jobs and less debt. We root it in fairness, we grow it with opportunity, and we build it together. I grew up in the Methodist Church and taught Sunday school. And one of my favorite passages of Scripture is, "Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me." Matthew 25:40. The passage teaches about God in each of us, that we are bound to each other, and we are called to act, not to sit, not to wait, but to act. All of us together. Senator Ted Kennedy understood that call. 4 years ago, he addressed our convention for the last time. He said, "We have never lost our belief that we are all called to a better country and a newer world. Generation after generation, Americans have answered that call, and now we are called again. We are called to restore opportunity for every American. We are called to give America's working families a fighting chance. We are called to build something solid so the next generation can build something better. So let me ask you, America, are you ready to answer this call? Are you ready to fight for good jobs and a strong middle class? Are you ready to work for a level playing field? Are you ready to prove to another generation of Americans that we can build a better country and a newer world? Joe Biden is ready. Barack Obama is ready. I'm ready. You're ready. Thank you. God bless America.
A very well-received speech there. Massachusetts Senate candidate Elizabeth Warren, also a professor at Harvard. We just saw a shot there of Mayor Rahm Emanuel. The crowd here, very excited for her. But it's a message, Rick, that we've been talking about a lot. This message about government being an important value and the real distinction that they're trying to make with Republicans, that they are the party of community and Republicans are the party of every man for him or herself.
Building up the necessity, the power of government, it's a tough case to make and a tough crowd to make it around. Terry Moran, Nightline anchor, joins us here in the booth. Terry, your thoughts about what we just heard from Elizabeth Warren, how this fits into the Democratic message?
Throwback. It was a throwback to some good old-fashioned tub-thumping Democratic populism, right? Making that case that coming together through the instrumentality of government, we can make a difference in people's lives. And using religious themes, biblical verses, to stir deeper emotions than technocratic, democratic, liberal policies do. It was an effective speech.
All right, we're getting now a video tribute to Bill Clinton. Oh, I'm sorry, we're not gonna go to that. If you want to watch it, abcnews.com. We'll get a little taste of it. Terry, you're the great abcnews.com viewer right there. But Terry, old-timey, old-fashioned perhaps a little bit with these themes, but important themes for Barack Obama to tap into.
Really, very much so, because he's got to stir that soul of the Democratic Party. They got to fall in love again. And one of the ways to get them to fall in love is with that good old-time religion. At the same time, Bill Clinton, who we're seeing this video about and who we're going to hear from in a minute, said the other day, when times are tough and people are afraid, they aren't looking for inspiration, they're looking for explanation. What's the plan? Where will you lead us? He's got to be careful that he doesn't adopt a plan from 1905. I mean, she's talking about the end of child labor and stuff like that.
But how does this play? I'm trying to think of the right word here, but how unique is it that the President of the United States is here for his convention? He just put wheels down. He's not made an appearance yet, but the very first appearance he's going to make at his own convention is standing on the stage with Bill Clinton.
That is a great question. I mean, it is clear their interdependence now. They each have a lot to offer each other, but it is an extraordinary historic moment. I mean, I'm trying to think. I guess Eisenhower must have showed up, certainly for Nixon, probably not for Goldwater. It's an extraordinary thing to take the baton, not as the other president leaves, but 4 years later after you fought with them all that time.
It's a little bit delayed in the relay race. Let's go to this Bill Clinton video, and we're going to see after that the big dog himself. Take a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President Bill Clinton.
Mr. Mayor, fellow Democrats, we are here to nominate a president. And I've got one in mind. I want to nominate a man whose own life has known its fair share of adversity and uncertainty. I want to nominate a man who ran for president to change the course of an already weak economy, and then just 6 weeks before his election, saw it suffer the biggest collapse since the Great Depression. A man who stopped the slide into depression and put us on the long road to recovery, knowing all the while that no matter how many jobs that he saved or created, there'd still be millions more waiting, worried about feeding our own kids, trying to keep their hopes alive. I want to nominate a man who's cool on the outside, but who burns for America on the inside. I want a man who believes with no doubt that we can build a new American dream economy driven by innovation and creativity, by education, and yes, by cooperation. And by the way, after last night, I want a man who had the good sense to marry Michelle Obama. Barack Obama to be the next president of the United States. And I proudly nominate him to be the standard bearer of the Democratic Party. Now, folks, in Tampa a few days ago, we heard a lot of talk about how the president and the Democrats don't really believe in free enterprise and individual initiative. How we want everybody to be dependent on the government. How bad we are for the economy. This Republican narrative, its alternative universe, says that every one of us in this room who amounts to anything, we're all completely self-made. One of the greatest chairmen the Democratic Party ever had, Bob Strauss, used to say that every politician wants every voter to believe he was born in a log cabin he built himself. But, as Strauss then admitted, it ain't so. We Democrats, we think the country works better with a strong middle class, with real opportunities for poor folks to work their way into it, with a relentless focus on the future, with business and government actually working together to promote growth and broadly shared prosperity. You see, we believe that we're all in this together is a far better philosophy than you're on your own. Now, who's right? Well, since 1961, for 52 years now, the Republicans have held the White House 28 years, the Democrats 24. In those 52 years, our private economy has produced 66 million private sector jobs. So what's the job score? Republicans, 24 million, Democrats, 42. for this. It turns out that advancing equal opportunity and economic empowerment is both morally right and good economics. Why? Because poverty, discrimination, and ignorance restrict growth. When you stifle human potential, when you don't invest in new ideas, it doesn't just cut off the people who are affected, it hurts us all. We know that investments in education and infrastructure and scientific and technological research increase growth. They increase good jobs and they create new wealth for all the rest of us. Now, there's something I've noticed lately, you probably have too, and it's this. Maybe just because I grew up in a different time, but though I often disagree with Republicans, I actually never learned to hate them the way the far right that now controls their party seems to hate our president and a lot of other Democrats. That would be impossible for me because President Eisenhower sent federal troops to my home state to integrate Little Rock Central High School. President Eisenhower built the interstate highway system. When I was a governor, I worked with President Reagan in his White House on the first round of welfare reform and with President George H.W. Bush on national education goals. I'm actually very grateful to, if you saw from the film what I do today, I have to be grateful, and you should be too, that President George W. Bush supported PEPFAR. It saved the lives of millions of people in poor countries. And I have been honored to work with both Presidents Bush on natural disasters in the aftermath of the South Asian tsunami, Hurricane Katrina, the horrible earthquake in Haiti. Through my foundation, both in America and around the world, I'm working all the time with Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Sometimes I couldn't tell you for the life who I'm working with because we focus on solving problems and seizing opportunities and not fighting all the time. So here's what I want to say to you. And here's what I want the people at home to think about. When times are tough and people are frustrated and angry and hurting and uncertain, the politics of constant conflict may be good. But what is good politics does not necessarily work in the real world. What works in the real world is cooperation. What works in the real world is cooperation. Business and government, foundations and universities. Ask the mayors who are here. Los Angeles is getting green and Chicago is getting an infrastructure bank because Republicans and Democrats are working together to get it. They didn't check their brains at the door, they didn't stop disagreeing, but their purpose was to get something done. Now, why is this true? Why does cooperation work better than constant conflict? Because nobody's right all the time, and a broken clock is right twice a day. And every one of us and every one of them, we're compelled to spend our fleeting lives between those two extremes, knowing we're never going to be right all the time and hoping we're right more than twice a day. Unfortunately, the faction that now dominates the Republican Party doesn't see it that way. They think government is always the enemy, they're always right, and compromise is weakness. Just in the last couple of elections, they defeated 2 distinguished Republican senators because they dared to cooperate with Democrats on issues important to the future of the country, even national security. They beat a Republican congressman with almost 100% voting record on every conservative score because he said he realized he did not have to hate the president to disagree with him. Boy, that was a non-starter, and they threw him out. One of the main reasons we ought to re-elect President Obama is that he is still committed to constructive cooperation. Look at his record. Look at his record. Look at his record. He appointed Republican secretaries of defense, the Army, and transportation. He appointed a vice president who ran against him in 2008. And he trusted that vice president to oversee the successful end of the war in Iraq and the implementation of the Recovery Act. And Joe Biden did a great job with both. President Obama appointed several members of his cabinet, even though they supported Hillary in the primary. Heck, he even appointed Hillary. Now, wait a minute. I am very proud of her. I am proud of the job she and the national security team have done for America. I am grateful that they have worked together to make us safer and stronger, to build a world with more partners and fewer enemies. I'm grateful for the relationship of respect and partnership she and the president have enjoyed, and the signal that sends to the rest of the world that democracy does not have to be a blood sport. It can be an honorable enterprise that advances the public interest. Besides the national security team, I am very grateful to the men and women who served our country in uniform through these perilous times. And I am especially grateful to Michelle Obama and to Joe Biden for supporting those military families while their loved ones were overseas. And for supporting our veterans when they came home. When they come home bearing the wounds of war or needing help to find education or jobs or housing. President Obama's whole record on national security is a tribute to his strength, to his judgment, and to his preference for inclusion and partnership over partisanship. We need more of it in Washington, D.C. Now, we all know that he also tried to work with congressional Republicans on health care, debt reduction, and new jobs. And that didn't work out so well. But it could have been because, as the Senate Republican leader said in a remarkable moment of candor 2 full years before the election, their #1 priority was not to put America back to work. It was to put the president out of work. Well, wait a minute. Senator, I hate to break it to you, but we're going to keep President Obama on the job. Yeah. Are you ready for that? Are you willing to work for it? Wait a minute. In Tampa, did y'all watch their convention? I did. In Tampa, the Republican argument against the president re-election was actually pretty simple, pretty snappy. It went something like this. We left him a total mess. He hadn't cleaned it up fast enough, so fire him and put us back in. But they did it well. They looked good, they sounded good. They convinced me that they all loved their families and their children and were grateful they'd been born in America and all. Really, I'm not being, they did. And this is important. They convinced me they were honorable people who believe what they've said and they're going to keep every commitment they've made. We just got to make sure the American people know what those commitments are. Because in order to look like an acceptable, reasonable, moderate alternative to President Obama, they just didn't say very much about the ideas they've offered over the last 2 years. They couldn't. Because they want to go back to the same old policies that got us in trouble in the first place. They want to cut taxes for high-income Americans even more than President Bush did. They want to get rid of those pesky financial regulations designed to prevent another crash and prohibit future bailouts. They want to actually increase defense spending over a decade, $2 trillion more than the Pentagon has requested, without saying what they'll spend it on. And they want to make enormous cuts in the rest of the budget, especially programs that help the middle class and poor children. As another president once said, there they go again. Now, I like the argument for President Obama's re-election a lot better. Here it is. He inherited a deeply damaged economy. He put a floor under the crash. He began the long, hard road to recovery and laid the foundation for a modern, more well-balanced economy that will produce millions of good new jobs, vibrant new businesses, and lots of new wealth for innovators. Now, are we where we want to be today? No. Is the president satisfied? Of course not. But are we better off than we were when he took office? Listen to this. Listen to this. Everybody's forgotten. Everybody's forgotten. When President Barack Obama took office, the economy was in free fall. It had just shrunk 9 full % of GDP. We were losing 750,000 jobs a month. Are we doing better than that today? The answer is yes. Now look, here's the challenge he faces and the challenge all of you who support him face. I get it. I know it. I've been there. A lot of Americans are still angry and frustrated about this economy. If you look at the numbers, you know employment is growing, banks are beginning to lend again. In a lot of places, housing prices are even beginning to pick up. But too many people do not feel it yet. I had the same thing happen in 1994 and early 95. We could see that the policies were working, that the economy was growing, but most people didn't feel it yet. Thankfully, by 1996, the economy was roaring, everybody felt it, and we were halfway through the longest peacetime expansion in the history of the United States. But, wait. The difference this time is purely in the circumstances. President Obama started with a much weaker economy than I did. Listen to me now. No president, not me, not any of my predecessors, no one could have fully repaired all the damage that he found in just 4 years. Now, but He has laid the foundations for a new, modern, successful economy of shared prosperity. And if you will renew the president's contract, you will feel it. You will feel it. Folks, whether the American people believe what I just said or not may be the whole election. I just want you to know that I believe it. With all my heart, I believe it. Now, why do I believe it? I'm fixing to tell you why. I believe it because President Obama's approach embodies the values, the ideas, and the direction America has to take to build the 21st century version of the American dream, a nation of shared opportunities, shared responsibilities, shared prosperity, a shared sense of community. So let's get back to the story. In 2010, as the president's recovery program kicked in, the job losses stopped and things began to turn around. The Recovery Act saved or created millions of jobs and cut taxes. Let me say this again, cut taxes for 95% of the American people. In the last 29 months, our economy has produced about 4.5 million private sector jobs. We could have done better, but last year the Republicans blocked the president's job plan, costing the economy more than 1 million new jobs. So here's another job score. President Obama plus 4.5 million. Congressional Republicans, 0. During this period, more than 500,000 manufacturing jobs have been created under President Obama. That's the first time manufacturing jobs have increased since the 1990s. And I'll tell you something else. The auto industry restructuring worked. It saved more than 1 million jobs, and not just at GM, Chrysler, and their dealerships, but in auto parts manufacturing all over the country. That's why even the automakers who weren't part of the deal supported it. They needed to save those parts suppliers too. Like I said, we're all in this together. So what's happened? There are now 250,000 more people working in the auto industry than on the day the companies were restructured. So, now, we all know that Governor Romney opposed the plan to save GM and Chrysler. So, here's another job score. Are you listening in Michigan and Ohio and across the country? Here's another job score. Obama, 250,000. Romney, 0. Now, the agreement the administration made with the management, labor, and environmental groups to double car mileage, that was a good deal too. It will cut your gas prices in half, your gas bill. No matter what the price is, if you double the mileage of your car, your bill will be half what it would have been. It will make us more energy independent. It will cut greenhouse gas emissions. And according to several analyses over the next 20 years, it'll bring us another 500,000 good new jobs into the American economy. The president's energy strategy, which he calls all of the above, is helping too. The boom in oil and gas production, combined with greater energy efficiency, has driven oil imports to a near 20-year low and natural gas production to an all-time high. And renewable energy production has doubled. Of course, we need a lot more new jobs, but there are already more than 3 million jobs open and unfilled in America. mostly because the people who apply for them don't yet have the required skills to do them. So even as we get Americans more jobs, we have to prepare more Americans for the new jobs that are actually going to be created. The old economy is not coming back. We've got to build a new one and educate people to do those jobs. The President and his Education Secretary have supported community colleges and employers in working together to train people for jobs that are actually open in their communities. And even more important, after a decade in which exploding college costs have increased the dropout rate so much that the percentage of our young people with four-year college degrees has gone down so much that we have dropped to 16th in the world in the percentage of young people with college degrees. So, the President's student loan reform is more important than ever. Here's what it does. Here's what it does. You need to tell every voter where you live about this. It lowers the cost of federal student loans, and even more important, it gives students the right to repay those loans as a clear, fixed, low percentage of their income for up to 20 years. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean? Think of it. It means no one will ever have to drop out of college again for fear they can't repay their debt. And it means that if someone wants to take a job with a modest income, a teacher, a police officer, if they want to be a small town doctor in a little rural area, they won't have to turn those jobs down because they don't pay enough to repay the debt. Their debt obligation will be determined by their salary. This will change the future for young Americans. I don't know about you, but on all these issues, I know we're better off because President Obama made the decisions he did. Now, that brings me to health care. Now the Republicans call it derisively Obamacare. They say it's a government takeover, a disaster, and that if we'll just elect them, they'll repeal it. Well, are they right? Let's take a look at what's actually happened so far. First, individuals and businesses have already gotten more than $1 billion in refunds from insurance companies because the new law requires 80 to 85% of your premium to go to your health care, not profits or promotion. And the gains are even greater than that because a bunch of insurance companies have applied to lower their rates to comply with the requirement. Second, more than 3 million young people between 19 and 25 are insured for the first time because their parents' policies can cover them. Third, millions of seniors are receiving preventive care, all the way from breast cancer screenings to tests for heart problems and scores of other things, and younger people are getting them too. Fourth, soon the insurance companies, not the government, the insurance companies will have millions of new customers, many of them middle-class people with pre-existing conditions who never could get insurance before. Now, finally, listen to this. For the last 2 years, after going up at 3 times the rate of inflation for a decade, for the last 2 years, health care costs have been under 4% in both years for the first time in 50 years. So, let me ask you something. Are we better off because President Obama fought for health care reform? You bet we are. Now, there were 2 other attacks on the president in Tampa I think deserve an answer. First, both Governor Romney and Congressman Ryan attacked the president for allegedly robbing Medicare of $716 billion. That's the same attack they leveled against the Congress in 2010. And they got a lot of votes on it. But it's not true. Look, here's what really happened. You be the judge. Here's what really happened. There were no cuts to benefits at all. None. What the president did was to save money by taking the recommendations of a commission of professionals to cut unwarranted subsidies to providers and insurance companies that were not making people healthier and were not necessary to get the providers to provide the service. And instead of raiding Medicare, he used the savings to close the donut hole in the Medicare drug program. And you all got to listen carefully to this. This is really important. And to add 8 years to the life of the Medicare Trust Fund so it is solvent till 2024. So President Obama and the Democrats didn't weaken Medicare, they strengthened Medicare. Now, when Congressman Ryan looked into that TV camera and attacked President Obama's Medicare savings as, quote, the biggest, coldest power play, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because that $716 billion is exactly to the dollar the same amount of Medicare savings that he has in his own budget. You got to get one thing, it takes some brass to attack a guy for doing what you did. Now you're having a good time, but this is getting serious. I want you to listen. It's important, because a lot of people believe this stuff. Now, at least on this issue, and this one issue, Governor Romney has been consistent. He attacked President Obama too, but he actually wants to repeal those savings and give the money back to the insurance company. He wants to go back to the old system, which means we'll reopen the donut hole and force seniors to pay more for drugs. And we'll reduce the life of the Medicare Trust Fund by 8 full years. So, if he's elected, and if he does what he promised to do, Medicare will now grow broke in 2016. Think about that. That means, after all, we won't have to wait until their voucher program kicks in 2023 to see the end of Medicare as we know it. They're going to do it to us sooner than we thought. Now, folks, this is serious because it gets worse. And you won't be laughing when I finish telling you this. They also want to block grant Medicaid and cut it by 1/3 over the coming 10 years. Of course, that's going to really hurt a lot of poor kids. But that's not all. A lot of folks don't know it, but nearly 2/3 of Medicaid is spent on nursing home care for Medicare seniors who are eligible for Medicaid. It's going to end Medicare as we know it. And a lot of that money is also spent to help people with disabilities, including a lot of middle-class families whose kids have Down syndrome or autism or other severe conditions. And honestly, just think about it. If that happens, I don't know what those families are going to do. So I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do everything I can to see that it doesn't happen. We can't let it happen. We can't. Now, wait a minute. Let's look at the other big charge the Republicans made. It's a real doozy. They actually have charged and run ads saying that President Obama wants to weaken the work requirements in the welfare reform bill I signed that moved millions of people from welfare to work. Wait, you need to know, here's what happened. Nobody ever tells you what really happened. Here's what happened. When some Republican governors asked if they could have waivers to try new ways to put people on welfare back to work, the Obama administration listened, because we all know it's hard for even people with good work histories to get jobs today, so moving folks from welfare to work is a real challenge. And the administration agreed to give waivers to those governors and others only if they had a credible plan to increase employment by 20%, and they could keep the waivers only if they did increase employment. Now, did I make myself clear? The requirement was for more work, not less. So, this is personal to me. We moved millions of people off welfare. It was one of the reasons that in the 8 years I was president, we had 100 times as many people move out of poverty into the middle class than happened under the previous 12 years. 100 times as many. It's a big deal. But I am telling you, the claim that President Obama weakened welfare reform's work requirement is just not true. But they keep on running ads claiming it. You want to know why? Their campaign poster said, "We are not going to let our campaign be dictated by fact checkers." Now, finally I can say that is true. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I hope you and every American within the sound of my voice remembers it every time they see one of those ads and it turns into an ad to re-elect Barack Obama and keep the fundamental principles of personal empowerment and moving everybody who can get a job into work as soon as we can. Now, let's talk about the debt. Today, interest rates are low, lower than the rate of inflation. People are practically paying us to borrow money, hold their money for them. But it will become a big problem when the economy grows and interest rates start to rise. We've got to deal with this big long-term debt problem, or it will deal with us. It'll gobble up a bigger and bigger percentage of the federal budget we'd rather spend on education and health care and science and technology. We got to deal with it. Now, what has the president done? He has offered a reasonable plan of $4 trillion in debt reduction over a decade, with $2.5 trillion coming from, for every $2.5 trillion in spending cuts, he raises $1 in new revenues, 2.5 to 1. And he has tight controls on future spending. That's the kind of balanced approach proposed by the Simpson-Bowles Commission, a bipartisan commission. Now, I think this plan is way better than Governor Romney's plan. First, the Romney plan fails the first test of fiscal responsibility. The numbers just don't add up. I mean, consider this. What would you do if you had this problem? Somebody says, oh, we got a big debt problem, we got to reduce the debt. So what's the first thing he says we're going to do? Well, to reduce the debt, we're going to have another $5 trillion in tax cuts, heavily weighted to upper income people. So we'll make the debt hole bigger before we start to get out of it. Now, when you say, what are you going to do about this $5 trillion you just added on? They say, oh, we'll make it up by eliminating loopholes in the tax code. So then you ask, well, which loopholes and how much? You know what they say? See me about that after the election. I'm not making it up. That's their position. See me about that after the election. Now, people ask me all the time how we got 4 surplus budgets in a row. What new ideas did we bring to Washington? I always give a one-word answer. Arithmetic. If they stay with this $5 trillion tax cut plan in a debt reduction plan, the arithmetic tells us, no matter what they say, one of 3 things is about to happen. One, assuming they try to do what they say they'll do, cover it by deductions, cutting those deductions. One, they'll have to eliminate so many deductions, like the ones for home mortgages and charitable giving, that middle-class families will see their tax bills go up an average of $2,000, while anybody who makes $3 million or more will see their tax bill go down $250,000. Or, 2, they'll have to cut so much spending that they'll obliterate the budget for the national parks, for ensuring clean air, clean water, safe food, safe air travel. They'll cut way back on Pell Grants, college loans, early childhood education, child nutrition programs, all the programs that help to empower middle-class families and help poor kids. Oh, they'll cut back on investments in roads and bridges and science and technology and biomedical research. That's what they'll do. They'll hurt the middle class and the poor and put the future on hold to give tax cuts to upper income people who've been getting it all along. Or 3, in spite of all the rhetoric, they'll just do what they've been doing for more than 30 years. They'll go in and cut the taxes way more than they cut spending, especially with that big defense increase, and they'll just explode the debt and weaken the economy. And they'll destroy the federal government's ability to help you by letting interest gobble up all your tax payments. Don't you ever forget, when you hear them talking about this, that Republican economic policies quadrupled the national debt before I took office, in the 12 years before I took office, and double the debt in the 8 years after I left, because it defied arithmetic. It was a highly inconvenient thing for them in our debates that I was just a country boy from Arkansas, and I came from a place where people still thought 2 and 2 was 4. It's arithmetic. We simply cannot afford to give the reins of government to someone who will double down on trickle down. Now, think about this. President Obama's plan cuts the debt, honors our values, brightens the future of our children, our families, and our nations. It's a heck of a lot better. It passes the arithmetic test, and far more important, it passes the values test. My fellow Americans, all of us in this grand hall, and everybody watching at home, when we vote in this election, we'll be deciding what kind of country we want to live in. If you want a winner-take-all, your own society, you should support the Republican ticket. But if you want a country of shared opportunities and shared responsibility, we're all in this together society, you should vote for Barack Obama and Joe Biden. If you want America, if you want every American to vote, and you think it is wrong to change voting procedures just to reduce the turnout of younger, poorer, minority, and disabled voters, you should support Barack Obama. If you think the president was right to open the doors of American opportunity to all those young immigrants brought here when they were young so they can serve in the military or go to college, you must vote for Barack Obama. If you want a future of shared prosperity, where the middle class is growing and poverty is declining, where the American dream is really alive and well again, and where the United States maintains its leadership as a force for peace and justice and prosperity in this highly competitive world, you have to vote for Barack Obama. Look, I love our country so much, and I know we're coming back. For more than 200 years, through every crisis, we've always come back. People have predicted our demise ever since George Washington was criticized for being a mediocre surveyor with a bad set of wooden false teeth. And so far, every single person that's bet against America has lost money, because we always come back. We come through every fire a little stronger and a little better. And we do it because in the end we decide to champion the cause for which our founders pledged their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. The cause of forming a more perfect union. My fellow Americans, if that is what you want, if that is what you believe, you must vote and you must re-elect President Barack Obama. God bless you and God bless America.
Can you believe that the very first appearance Barack Obama is making as president at his own convention is to give a long, sustained hug to the man whose wife he defeated to get this job?
You can't write this stuff in a script, Amy.
Nope.
And if at this moment you forgot which of these two men is running for re-election, I think Barack Obama would be okay with that.
I tweeted this out, but in 1992, that was my very first convention, and I remember watching Bill Clinton there. It's remarkable to me that 20 years later, this man is still driving the narrative and gets this kind of reception at a Democratic convention.
This was a clinic of political speech-making. If you love politics, this is what you live to watch, to see this bravioso performance. across the board, checking every box, making the case for the Obama economy, for the Democratic vision. Middle class first, read those signs, and that was the message from Bill Clinton. He picked apart the Romney record. He went step by step in building up President Obama, and if you notice, Amy, as that speech went on, you should vote for Barack Obama became you must vote for Barack Obama as the pace quickened and the argument was made.
There was a lot of ad-libbing as well. This was a speech that I think went something like 45, 50 minutes, and much of it was thanks to the fact that he went off script, went off the prompter, but it ended up working quite well because he was having the time of his life there. You could see how much fun he was having.
In absolutely every way, and we're joined here in the booth by Austin Goolsbee, a former Obama economic advisor and ABC News consultant. And Austin, is there anyone better in the business?
No, you know, for doing that, there really isn't. You could see he was having a great time, and the crowd was eating it up. It did seem like there wasn't anybody better than the former president to kind of walk through, let's call it the rebuttal of they said this, but that's not true, and they said this, and here's how it wasn't accurate. So I think, I mean, it was a function that nobody else can turn on a crowd like that, but also nobody could kind of play that role, it seemed like.
Okay, so how does the president follow up on this? If it's true that he sort of gave the rebuttal, he's sort of set the path forward for the president, what does the president have to deliver on Thursday?
I'd be interested what you guys think, and you always be careful asking a guy with an economics PhD what does he need to do politically. But I think he's got to clarify. Here's how it's different. Here's how the program the president wants to do is different from the program that they want to do, and he's got to do it in a way that's credible, that people don't view as a caricature of what the Republicans are saying. But, you kind of heard the predicate last night, and from what President Clinton was saying, it feels like that's the way he's headed, that it's going to be about middle up, broad-based growth rather than top-down. So, that's what it feels like.
Austin, you're an economics professor. You try to convey what's going on in the economy. What makes the Bill Clinton message work, and particularly work for Democrats? What was he able to do? You've heard a lot of speeches by a lot of presidents, a lot of politicians over the years. What made this one special?
I thought that what President Clinton showed that he was always great at, which is it was very policy-oriented. I mean, he's talking about very specific policies.
A lot of policy, yes.
But in a way that's quite down to earth that people can understand, and just thinking about the student loans and explaining here's how the student loan program worked. Or a lot of people have been confused, if you're not a budget wonk, about what is this Medicare thing and the ads about Medicare or the welfare work requirement. I think President Clinton's able to kind of put things in a tangible way to people who might not have been paying that close of attention, who aren't junkies of the political system. If they turned it on to see him, it seemed like he's pretty good at explaining that.
Yeah, I think he's pretty good at explaining
he's
that.
Okay.
He has some experience doing that. Okay, so you were active, obviously, in the 2008 primaries.
Yeah.
With President Obama. How odd was it for you to see those two men hugging?
It was definitely different. I would say that was definitely different. It was a healthy, if somewhat combative rivalry between our two campaigns back in the day, but most all of that is long in the past.
Would you have ever imagined that you would be asking him, not you, but the campaign would be asking Bill Clinton
back
to
in
come back in
2008?
Yeah.
In 2008, probably not. Yeah. But since President Obama's been in office, I mean, obviously there was a great merging of the minds.
Hey,
of
Austin,
Clinton
hold on
people.
one second. We're going to jump down to John Carl right now, down on the floor. John Carl, can you hear us?
Madam Secretary. I can't, Amy. This crowd was into Bill Clinton up there that when they broke into... Representing the great state. Well, they're going through the roll call. They've been doing a little bit of this. They did a little bit of this yesterday. They're going through the roll call. We think, Amy, that Barack Obama's going to get the delegates he needs for nomination, but just in case they're up there on the stage keeping track.
Are you sure of that? Multiple sources tell you that?
But I've got to tell you... But I've got to tell you, Amy, they were so into Bill Clinton here that a few times when they went into the chant of 4 more years, that you almost wondered for a second, were they talking about 4 more years of Obama or maybe Bill Clinton? This was a pretty electrifying speech for this crowd, and interestingly, the loudest single moment during that speech happened when Bill Clinton said, "Are we better off than we were 4 years ago?" And this crowd erupted saying yes. And of course, as you know, the senior staffers on the Obama campaign had a hard time answering that question over the weekend. Now have come back with their answer. Yes, we're better off. Of course, there's a lot more to go. But this crowd, when that question was asked by Bill Clinton, he knew exactly what he was leading into, just erupted into a yes.
All right, John Karl on the floor.
And the delegate count continues on.
Yeah, keep us posted on that. Okay. Austin, back to you on this. The trajectory of the careers of these two men, so interesting. You have what Barack Obama said in the 1990s about the Clinton years, of course, those hard-fought, bitter primaries. Then to have this come full circle, the fact that embrace, as Amy said, is the image that he's out there with. What does it say to you about how the president frames this election, how he's thinking about these next 2 months, these next 4 years?
I think it is, the juxtaposition that almost irony that the president's saying, look, we ought to, on taxes, go back to what the rates were under Clinton. We ought to do the same people who said in 1993 that if you raised the high-income tax rates and if you put the focus on the middle class, it would lead to massive economic problems, are saying that again now. And so I do think that's a context for the economy where they go together. But I also think, look, as I say, the last 3.5 years or so of the administration, it's not a surprise to see them, what looked genuine to me. I think they've come to have a certain athletic respect for one another. They like the contest, and they got a lot in common, I think.
The President's Club. Austin Goolsby joining us here in the booth. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, Austin. Late night tonight. Cokie Roberts is down on the floor. Cokie, this speech felt like a living, breathing organism that involved the audience, involved this hall in a real way. What's it like down there?
Absolutely, and the audience, I think, in a couple of places surprised President Clinton with screaming at places he wasn't expecting them, but he got right with it every time it happened, and then expanded his remarks a little bit. But this was really not just a group of delegates who were excited, but it was a president who was really giving a masterful speech, because it was full of facts and figures and examples, while at the same time gigging the Republicans and going after them. A couple of times, several times, in fact, during the speech, I kept wondering why hadn't President Obama made the same case. President Clinton was really making a better case than we have heard out of the White House in recent months on all kinds of things, but particularly on health care. And I think that it really, to the degree that there are voters ready to be convinced, and that's a small degree as far as we know, this could be a very convincing speech. But it certainly worked in this hall. Boy, did it ever. And I was kind of struck at the end when he went with we'll come back. America will come back. It always has. And he kept saying, we'll come back. And of course, we know Bill Clinton as the comeback kid. And he was bringing that message of come back as the living, breathing example of it.
All right, ABC's Cokie Roberts on the floor. Thanks so much.
We're going to turn once again to our Yahoo friend, colleague, I guess our warrior together. We're warriors, right? Okay. Out here pushing through this. Okay, Olivia Knox, tell me about what you thought of the very end there, seeing those two men embrace each other, and it looked genuine. I mean, they held on to each other for quite some time. I couldn't quite tell who was the one running for re-election.
Yeah, that's a good point. And in the middle of that speech, I looked around, I was on the floor, and that crowd would have followed him anywhere. They would have followed Bill Clinton anywhere. There was a lot of cheering, a lot of people calling back out. And you're right, that embrace was important, kind of a symbolic torch passing of a sort. As they were walking out, though, Barack Obama kind of made a little more speed, and Bill Clinton took a little more time to shake some more hands. So the old dynamics are still very much alive.
You use the word old. This is the convention of forward, okay? We just went back to the president who built us a bridge to the 21st century. He built that bridge in 1996, 16 years ago. It's remarkable when you think about the fact that he's building this case for re-election based on another president's economy. This speech certainly uplifted this hall. I'd imagine it'll be well received by the many millions who are watching it at home. When it comes to presenting a vision, does this complicate things a bit for President Obama to have to say, look back, not the last 4 years, but, you know, back 20 years ago?
Well, you know, we talked about this a little bit before, and that the Obama frame for this election is the Clinton economy versus the George W. Bush economy. And to the extent that that's what he's going to be carrying forward until Election Day, you know, that works. But you're right, there are some challenges there. One is, what is Barack Obama going to say tomorrow? I mean, this felt from the floor. This felt like the smartest kid in the class explaining what the sort of crusty old professor has been telling you.
But don't you think what he has to explain is the thing that President Clinton didn't, which is, this is great, thank you, but specifically, how do we get there? What are you going to do, you, President Obama, in the next 4 years that is going to get the economy moving again, that's going to break the gridlock in Washington? This was in many ways a rebuttal, I felt like, to the attacks on President Obama. I feel like Obama has to still make that case for what he's going to do.
I think you're right, and I think what we're hearing on the stump from President Obama is very much in line with that. It's very much, here are some of the ideas that I propose, here's some of the things that I want to do. You know, he's left a lot of the second-term agenda vague. I mean, we've heard hints of, maybe I'll pursue immigration reform. Right. I have a jobs plan that Republicans are blocking, but maybe if I win, it'll get through. So we're hearing some specifics on the trail, but you're right. He has to give a plausible scenario for what the next 4 years will look like beyond the idea that we have to be afraid of Mitt Romney.
All right, Olivia Knox from Yahoo News, our partner in crime through all of these many, many hours. We thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to wrap up tonight's coverage with some closing thoughts. Keep in mind, we'll be right back here at 4:50 p.m. Eastern Time. Watch us at Yahoo News. Watch us at abcnews.com. Watch us on the YouTube Politics channel. Watch us on your mobile devices. Hashtag it at DNC2012, at Rick Klein, at Amy E. Walter. And Amy, let's leave with some closing thoughts and some closing sights and sounds from day 2 of the Democratic National Convention.
Barack Obama knows that to create an economy built to last, we need to focus on middle-class families. President Obama hasn't stopped fighting for those families, and now we need to fight for him.
The hard-fought rights of women are on the ballot, and our democracy is on the ballot. We believe in the government of the many, not the privileged few. When you go to the polls, vote for democracy. Vote for President Barack Obama.
This past July, the economy added 172,000 jobs, the 29th consecutive month of private sector job gains. Surely even Mr. Romney thinks we're better off today than we were then.
We're all going to be living in a country where our president either has our back or turns his back. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to choose.
Corporations are not people. People have hearts. They have kids. They get jobs. They get sick. They cry. They dance. They live. They love. And they die. And that matters.
We are here to nominate a president. I've got one in mind. One of the main reasons we ought to re-elect President Obama is that he is still committed to constructive cooperation. Look at his record. Look at his record. Democracy does not have to be a blood sport. It can be an honorable enterprise that advances the public interest. If you want a future of shared prosperity, where the middle class is growing and poverty is declining, where the American dream is really alive and well again, and where the United States maintains its leadership as a force for peace and justice and prosperity in this highly competitive world, you have to vote for Barack Obama.